Thank you for being here. I'd like to convene the meeting of the Ad Hoc Committee on Ending Poverty in Los Angeles. We embarked on this project, I embarked on this project in the Senate, and so I'm very pleased to continue the work here in Los Angeles. And I'll spare you all the backgrounds. Most of you here are partners in this effort and have been for many years. One thing I do want to do on the record is to commend Senator Barack Obama for announcing Friday that he intends to change the federal poverty guidelines to adhere to a more regionalized and more appropriate standard. I believe this is, at least in part, on the fact that the City Council supported a resolution that I introduced to call on the presidential candidates to do just that. Barack Obama was the second or first, arguably, of two presidential candidates who agreed to that, John Edwards being the other. And but just Friday, he announced it as a formal part of his policy agenda to change the federal poverty guidelines. I didn't make small note of the fact that the statement by the senator was identical to the statement in the resolution in City Council. I don't think that was an accident. And so I think this is a really good day for this committee in particular, because this is exactly the kind of impact we're hoping to see on this committee. Ms. Gruhl just walked in. I wanted to repeat that Friday, Senator Barack Obama announced that he is formally announcing that part of his program will include changing the federal poverty guidelines. And I was also saying that this is, I believe, in part or in large measure as a result of the resolution that the City Council passed to ask all presidential candidates to commit to changing the federal poverty guidelines. And the reason I say that was because the quote from the senator was identical to a portion of the resolution that was passed by City Council. So, so that should inspire this committee today. Ms. Gruhl was here for just a little bit of the other meeting. One comment I made after the last meeting was I wanted the presenters to be more critical of the document, the draft documents that we are preparing. And so we have contacted all the presenters today and said, tell us what you really think about our document, where shortfalls, what other things we might want to look at, what other concepts we might want to incorporate into the document. And so we actually have received written responses by several of the presenters today, so we do have a growing body of information that will help us finish the master plan. Again, at the beginning, I want to commend the 6 famous interns that are assisting us with this project. Without their help, in this case, David Friedman particularly, it has been a tremendous help on this particular chapter. But we have 5 other interns that are working on different chapters, and they really are putting the words down on paper for us and then adjusting as people come in with recommendations. So so thank you, David. And I think he's doing great work, but we always keep an open mind to changes, and we in fact encourage that and enjoy it. In fact, David was already telling me about some changes that he's making as a result of criticism, positive criticism that was presented. Positive feedback that has been presented by some of the presenters today. So with that, we want to move forward with the hearing. The first part of the hearing is actually dedicated to the federal poverty guidelines and self-sufficiency. The self-sufficiency index, I should say, the federal poverty guidelines as opposed to the self-sufficiency index and the working people. The myth that, as we try to put all of these in the context of myths, the myth that we are trying to explore here is the notion that people are poor because they don't work enough. And so with that, we want to ask Susan Smith, the Director of Californians for Family Economic Security, Insight Group, Kent Wong, Director of UCLA Labor Center, regarding unionization, low-wage workers, informal economy, and undocumented students, and Esmeralda Lopez, Local Policy Coordinator for CHIRLA, to step forward for our first panel.
She's on her way up in the building.
She what?
She's on her way up in the building.
Okay, Susan Smith is on her way. So with that, we will go directly to Kent Wong. Kent is very familiar with our project. He's testified before when I was in the Senate, and we really appreciate your participation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I wanted to thank Councilmember Alarcón and Gruel for their leadership, and particularly Councilmember Alarcón for continuing this work that he started in the California State Legislature and the leading voice to address critical concerns of poverty here in Los Angeles and throughout the state of California. I have a packet of materials I just wanted to briefly share with you what they consist of. The first, we actually have two separate student publications of our students at UCLA. One, Sweatshop Slaves, which chronicles the horrendous abuse here in Los Angeles of workers in the garment industry. Los Angeles has emerged as the sweatshop capital of the country. Unfortunately, we have surpassed New York in terms of the numbers of garment workers, many who live, below the poverty standards and are paid less than minimum wage. The second book just came out 2 months ago, and this was written by a group of undocumented students at UCLA that captures some of their stories and experiences. There are approximately 65,000 undocumented students who graduate from high school throughout the country every year. A large percentage are right here in the Los Angeles Unified School District, and until something is done, both at the state level and at the federal level, by means of the California DREAM Act and the Federal DREAM Act, we're going to essentially be locking a whole new generation of young people into poverty. And then I have two other publications that we've also published from the Labor Center. One is on the car wash industry. There is a major campaign right now to eradicate sweatshop conditions in the car wash industry of Los Angeles. There was a major expose in the Los Angeles Times that captured the abuse and problems in the car wash industry. And the second is a recently enacted construction careers policy that has been passed by the Community Redevelopment Agency and unanimously adopted by the LA City Council, and so I really applaud you on your support for that. And through that, through a combination of a construction careers policy with a project labor agreement and local hire provisions, we are now in the city of Los Angeles positioned to provide new opportunities for communities that desperately need good jobs in the construction field. And so this is really leading the country, this construction careers policy passed by the CRA. And this is a report that our community scholars program at the UCLA Labor Center, executive summary of a 80-page report on the issue of project labor agreements here in Los Angeles. So the critical issues that you are confronting are multifaceted and have multiple factors for the persistent problems of poverty, but one is the declining union density across the country and in the state of California as well. Union density nationally is at its lowest level in the last 50 years. It is about 12% across the country. We're doing a little better here in Los Angeles at about 16 to 18%. And more importantly, some of the most successful organizing campaigns in the country have occurred right here in Los Angeles, from the Justice for Janitors, the hotel workers, the home care workers, the healthcare workers, to name a few. And so we see that in industries where there is stronger union density, there is also stronger enforcement of the law. Conversely, in those areas where union density is very weak, such as the garment industry here in Los Angeles, labor law is violated routinely. And so that's the impact of high levels of unionization industry by industry. The other thing we find is that the impact, once workers have been brought into unions and their wages and benefits have been increased, that their lives change dramatically. With better wages and benefits, they can lift their children and their families out of poverty. They can spend more time with their children. The burden of public assistance diminishes. More money can be spent within their communities, which has a positive multiplier effect. And they can also have a more positive impact on society as a whole. Low-wage jobs, on the other hand, create a downward spiral of poverty, and poverty workers must frequently work 2 or 3 jobs to survive. And so one of the key factors in terms of lifting, unionization rates is that it is the most effective way of alleviating poverty. The other critical issue I wanted to address here is the relationship between immigration status and labor laws. And the problem with the intensified raids by ICE is that it is having a major negative impact on pushing the underground economy further underground. And so I was very pleased that Mayor Villaraigosa and leaders of the business community came to the UCLA Downtown Labor Center in spring to hold a press conference denouncing the raids and their negative impact on the economy of Los Angeles, and especially the negative impact on immigrant workers and their communities. So I think that's a really crucial issue that the City Council needs to pay attention to, the impact of raids and the disparity between the enforcement of labor laws and immigration laws.
Could I ask you on that point? In fact, it's in crafting this document, we have to be mindful that we're actually writing about a 10, 20, 30-year plan.
That's right.
And so we have to be careful not to exacerbate the temporal issues. We need to expose some of them, but we could use some guidance in working with you to ensure that we capture the sense, but we don't lose the broader issue, the 20-year policy on the immigrant workforce that indeed is in Los Angeles, because we don't know what next year's issue will be and the subsequent issues, so we would like to work with you on how to craft a document that is meaningful not just for this year, but should the federal government's position change dramatically, let's just say in January, the third week in January of next year, then the document might be outdated before it gets printed. So if we could also, we definitely want to cover some of these issues, but we definitely want a long-term agenda. You can help us with that.
I completely support the notion of a long-term agenda, and I also value the role that Los Angeles historically has played in leading the nation on many of these issues. On the issue of immigration in particular, though, there is a direct link between people's undocumented status and their life in poverty. Mm-hmm. And what we find is, if you look at the impact of the Immigration Reform and Control Act back in 1986, with a whole new wave of legalization and new opportunities for immigrant workers who had previously been locked in poverty, sub-minimum wage jobs, once they had their legal status, it changed their lives and their families' lives. They were able to get jobs outside of the underground economy. They were able to provide for their families, and it's made a huge impact on not only the lives of those workers and their families, but the broader communities that have benefited from the...
So the fundamental concept that you're presenting is, in fact, it's interesting. I just talked about this yesterday in a TV program Channel 35 is doing, and that is that poverty is ephemeral, and that there are solutions to move people from poverty out of poverty. The question with immigration, the long-term question, is always going to be how quickly you move them into legal status so that they can take care of themselves.
That is correct. But any research that would look at the impact of former immigration reform would point to the ability of immigrant workers to lift themselves out of poverty when they are given the opportunity to legally work in this country. So that's a fundamental issue that is especially impactful to the Los Angeles economy. And if I could just conclude on this issue of the undocumented students, because this is an issue that is near and dear to my heart. I've been teaching at UCLA for 20 years, and some of the most extraordinary students in my career our undocumented students. I have never met a more motivated group of
I should point out
individuals.
to the audience that you were 12.
I have never met a more motivated group of individuals who, in spite of the fact that they can't get a driver's license, they can't get financial aid, they can't get student loans, they can't get work study, they can't afford to live on campus and commute 2 hours each way to come to UCLA, they work and scrape their dollars together working in the underground economy and graduate with degrees from UCLA. So this book captures their stories and their experiences. And what is so tragic is that here we have a situation where you have an educated, motivated group of young people who want to practice their careers as teachers and social workers and professionals. And yet, until there is a change in the law, they will forever be locked in poverty jobs in the underground economy. So, so there is a direct link between this issue of the California DREAM Act, the Federal DREAM Act, and the opportunities and hopes for literally hundreds of thousands of young people to aspire to the American dream.
And I think we just adopted last week the full council, entire council, supported the California DREAM Act and the importance of that, and those students having the same opportunities. And it doesn't matter what political party you are from, you have to understand that how important it is to help these young people achieve. Otherwise, you're just pushing them down into poverty, and that they similarly have extraordinary opportunities and are just contributing immensely to our city and to our state and our country in that way. So it's really an important aspect of that. So I'm glad I'll have to read this book. I hadn't seen that, and thank you, Kent, for all of that you've done, particularly highlighting on these issues and the importance of all of these documents which allow us to go and advocate with some real facts behind us, and that's what's been great about the Labor Center, is that in that relationship. So, and you've gone outside just the wall, so to speak, of UCLA and brought it to the people and to the legislative bodies. So I want to thank you for that.
Well, yes, and first let me say that when I said we want to create a long-term agenda, that's not to say that we're not going to act in the short term. In fact, City Council has acted, I believe, on all three of these issues. I know they've acted on the sweatshop and undergrads issue. I'm not sure about the car wash industry, but I believe
It's coming up on the agenda.
Yeah.
So, the master plan to end poverty in Los Angeles, while it may mention anecdotally some of the current issues and present a longer strategy for ending poverty, it will also be acting as we speak. In fact, resolutions that emerge through this committee will be introduced immediately. In fact, tomorrow I'll be introducing a motion to have the City of Los Angeles adopt an ordinance similar to the ordinance that Mayor Bloomberg in New York announced last week to change their own poverty guidelines and not wait for the federal government to act, but we can do it ourselves. And so, but the one thing I did want to say, this is particularly for the benefit of the interns, I really like the way you presented this information. I want the interns, if you can get a copy of these, all of you, if you can. I know they're from USC, Mr. Wong, but please let them have these documents. First of all, we may want to borrow some of the anecdotes.
Please.
What we want to do is incorporate into the document anecdotes about real people. That's exactly what you did in both of these. In fact, I think you did it in here too.
That's right.
Not this one, but in these.
That one as well.
That one too?
in the full report on the
in the
on the project labor agreements. This is executive summary, but we have a lot of great stories of construction workers.
And what I have tried to impress upon all the people who are participating in the writing, it is just as important to me to write the anecdotal stories about what's really happening in the life of Jose Martinez or whatever, whoever the person is, to really say what is going on. And I also like the format it reads. It makes it a little more interesting. The quotes that are superimposed and all those things. I mention that because I want the interns to incorporate that into their writing, and my staff as well as they participate. If you, now, one thing I did want to ask you is, have you had a chance to read the draft?
I looked through it very quickly. I'm happy to give a more substantive reply if you'd like.
Maybe your 200 interns would be able to help us. We would appreciate any input at all.
No, but I definitely think you're on the right track. I like the approach of both keeping sight of the broader vision and the long-term goals of alleviating poverty, but also looking at the immediate policy steps that the City Council can take that have a direct and positive impact.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. And thank you very much. We've been a long-term partner, and I know that will continue, and I appreciate that.
And anything that we can do to support at the UCLA Labor Center, please keep us posted.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Susan Smith here? She's still on her way up. Esmeralda Lopez from Local Policy Coordinator of Chirla.
Hi. Thank you for inviting me and having me hearing.
Thank you.
Today I'm going to talk about poverty in the context of Los Angeles, the Los Angeles immigrant community. Chirla's work is focused on the protection of immigrants' rights in Los Angeles. In our work with the immigrant community, we see and have become familiar with the various struggles that are facing immigrants today. One of those struggles is obviously overcoming poverty and achieving financial success. My testimony today will detail the struggles of household workers, day laborers, and street vendors as part of the informal economy. First, I'll discuss some general statistical data of the economic contributions of immigrants, and secondly, I'll discuss the challenges that household workers face. Next, I will discuss with you the obstacles that day laborers face, and finally, I will talk about the challenges of street vendors in Los Angeles. Although these workers form part of the informal economy, they are an important part of the Los Angeles economic structure. The lives of these workers must be examined in order to come up with a real solution for the problems of Los Angeles. In terms of percentages of the labor force as a whole, immigrants, including undocumented immigrants in Los Angeles County, make up 59% of the service sector and 80% of the manufacturing workers, 67% of construction workers, 62% of transportation workers, 46% of sales workers, 56% of agricultural workers, and 61% of installation workers. Even in fields where immigrants are less likely to work, their numbers are significant. They account for 30% of professional workers, 38% of office workers, and 34% of management and business workers in the Los Angeles County. Now for a discussion on household workers. Household work has long been a means for poor women to secure a wage. According to Chirla's Household Workers Project study of Los Angeles household workers, they experience highly exploitative labor conditions both from domestic employers and from domestic employment agencies and from employers themselves. In addition, this survey highlights other compelling labor violations taking place within the industry. The average weekly wage in 2003 for a household worker for approximately 50 hours of work or more per week was $200 a week. Half of these women have claimed to have been the victim of verbal abuse, and 22% have claimed to be the victim of physical abuse. Despite these hardships, very few women, only 5%, report these grievances to outside parties. Protection of these women is essential for the success of the Los Angeles economy. Now regarding day laborers, more than half of day laborers have lived in the United States for less than 5 years, and almost 30% came to the United States within the last year. This indicates that the occupation of a day laborer is a transitory one. These are, for the most part, men that have recently entered the United States and seek to incorporate themselves more formally into this economy. Some of the difficulties these workers face is the instability of work and the competitiveness of their work. The work opportunities that present themselves to these workers are not often predictable, and therefore their monthly wages can vary from $568 a month to $1,069 a month. Day laborers also face the abuse of non-payment. Many of these workers were promised payment but never receive it. Additionally, employers don't pay these workers the agreed upon fee, and sometimes are even abandoned at work sites by their employers. And finally, street vendors have been a part of the Los Angeles landscape for many years. They are a truly informal group that seek to earn their wages on the streets of the city. The problem with street vending in the city of Los Angeles is that it is heavily restricted and for the most part forbidden. Claims have been made that these regulations and ordinances are created in an effort to protect against traffic congestion or to protect the Los Angeles residents' health. However, as is evident by anyone who drives through this city, the prohibitions of these vendors have been an utter and complete failure. Incorporating these vendors into the formal economy of Los Angeles would be beneficial. Street vendors are entrepreneurs that will help the Los Angeles economy and should be encouraged instead of hindered. As of 2005, first-generation immigrants had started at least 22 of Los Angeles' 100 fastest-growing companies. Immigrant entrepreneurs in Los Angeles have founded nationally successful firms such as El Pollo Loco, Panda Express, and Lulu's Desserts. According to one estimate, immigrants are starting as much as 80% of the businesses in Los Angeles. The incorporation of these groups into the formal economy is imperative and clearly for the benefit of immigrants, but also for the benefit of Los Angeles. The United States, and especially the city of Los Angeles, are largely successful due to the labor and other contributions of immigrants. Thank you.
Thank you. Obviously, the immigrant community, we can't paint an accurate picture of poverty in Los Angeles without discussing the issue of immigration and immigrants and their role in the workplace and how it impacts our economy. So I guarantee you that the master plan will need more of your assistance in formalizing. As we formalize that document, we need more input from you, and so that we can paint an accurate picture, and also deal with the reality and shed a full light on what's going on. One of the sad facts is that everybody knows about it, and many people choose to talk negatively about it, but nobody wants to do anything about it. And the vast majority of people are contributing to it by buying from the local the vendor, whether it's corn or popsicles or chicken. I could name corners. In fact, on Channel 35, I don't know if you saw the show. It was late in the evening, I think, and I turned on the TV, and there was a whole show, and it was a panel of people who were supporting the truckers, the lunch trucks, and they were even identifying who made the best carne asada on the truck. So that's not to make light of it. It's a tough issue, but when you put it in the context, I actually know one of the founders of Pollo Loco. He comes from Pacoima. From Sinaloa to Pacoima to Pollo Loco to Denny's. Well, but that's a whole other story. But I want to thank you. I do appreciate you staying because some of the questions that we want to ask will need your support. Susan Smith is the Director of Californians for Family Economic Security, and you're specifically here to talk a little bit about the self-sufficiency index, and I commended Senator Obama for last Friday announcing that he formally takes that position. I sent a letter to him in October, and I'm very excited about his response. So.
And I commend your efforts, and we were very excited to see that there's actually been some movement now at the federal level and that it's been entered into the debate that the federal poverty line is no longer an accurate measure for today's economy, and we need something new. I want to apologize, first of all. I wish I could say it was a flight delay, but it was a scheduling issue on my end, so I apologize for that.
Least of all from me.
So, again, my name is Susan Smith, and I'm Director of Californians for Economic Self-Sufficiency. The National Economic Development and Law Center is an organization that has been around since 1969. We recently had a new name, and so we're now the Insight Center for Community Economic Development. So some of you might have heard of our old name. We're a national research, legal, and consulting organization dedicated to building economic health in low-income communities. The mission of the particular project that I work on is that it's bold, but it's essentially that all Californians will be able to meet their basic needs and advance to economic security. And our strategy, the main way we do that, is through creating a paradigm shift in the way we measure and address poverty in this country. through this alternative measure we're introducing today and that you are familiar with. So just very briefly, in order to understand where we're going, we kind of need to know what was wrong with the past. So most people don't know that the federal poverty line was created based on 1950s data, and it was created by an economist in 1962, Molly Orshansky.
Would that be the census of 1952?
It was actually a food survey that was done in 1955.
Okay.
And at the time, the best consumer expenditure data we had suggested that households spend 1/3 of their after-tax income on food. So they took, the Department of Agriculture has 4 different food budgets. They took the lowest of that, the basic needs budget, which on the Department of HHS website says if you remain on this budget for 6 months or more, you could be endangering the health of yourself and your family. They took that minimum budget, they multiplied it times 3, and indexed it for inflation. And that's essentially how we have our poverty line. And as
It's
you,
the same in every community across the nation.
it's the same in every community across the nation, in every county across the state. It varies by the number of people within a household, but not by their ages. So if you've got an infant versus a teenager, your childcare costs, of course, are dramatically different. Doesn't take that into account.
Nor cost of housing.
Doesn't look at cost. It's just one measure. It's
Care.
just food. So it assumed at the time in the 1950s, most women were home taking care of their kids. So childcare cost isn't taken into effect. And a lot of people, even policymakers, aren't aware of kind of just the assumptions under it. But most people know.
Can I ask you?
Yeah, sure.
In 1962, when Myra, what was her name?
Molly Orshansky,
Molly, I was going to say Myra Lansky. What was her name again?
Molly Orshansky.
Orshansky.
Uh-huh.
When Molly Orshansky did this formula, she was actually a very liberal person trying to help solve a problem. What was the problem she was trying to solve?
It was actually looking at food stamps allocation,
Oh, okay.
which is why they looked at the food budget. And
We've taken that guideline and now applied it to a million other things.
exactly.
It doesn't make sense in that context, in
Ex-
those contexts.
Exactly. And she herself said, over time, what's happened is the federal poverty line has been used as a measure of income adequacy. So it's, the gatekeeper for a lot of our public services, as we know, and public supports. But she herself said it was never meant to be a measure of income adequacy. It was supposed to be a measure of income inadequacy. And so she lobbied against the application of her own standard that she developed, which is sort of an interesting side note. And it's become this measure of deprivation. It's sort of where you don't want to be. It doesn't tell public policymakers where you want to be. And what's the minimum standard you need to meet your basic needs? What's the goal?
What is the quality of life? What is the American dream? What is the quality of life that we want to hold as a standard for our country?
And
So this is the minimum.
that's the minimum, yeah. And what you'll see is, and as you know, this standard is used, the federal poverty line is used for a variety of public programs from Medi-Cal to food stamps. It also determines how much state and federal resources flow to local communities. So the federal government will look at how many people are below the federal poverty line to determine how much money will go to a community. So in high-cost areas like LA, where people below the federal poverty line can't really stay, a lot of times they leave because it's just too hard to stay here. If you're at $10,000 a year for a single person, you sort of miss out on all the people who are above the federal poverty line, but below what they really need to make ends meet. There's this whole other group of people. And you don't get the resources to support them because funding flows according to the percentage of people below. So we've introduced these new standards. We've created both a family self-sufficiency standard and an elder economic security standard that looks at what is the cost of meeting basic needs in the real market without any subsidies, without any public subsidies. We're part of a national movement. There are 35 standards throughout the country. We've got partners throughout the country working on both of these standards that can sort of build this grassroots movement for a change, which is why we're so excited about what's going on federally. And it's county specific. So these standards, for our elder standard, actually looks at both the city and the county cost of living for retired seniors. For our family standard, it looks at county specific, so LA County. It looks at income needed for housing, food, childcare, transportation, out-of-pocket medical expenses, and other basic household items. So
you said there were how many standards? 34?
there's 35 standards across the country, yeah. Same methodology, same researcher. For the elder standard, that's new, and that right now is in 5 states. We're part of a pilot program, but will be in 20 states and will be calculated across the country eventually.
Now, I introduced a resolution to encourage the change of the federal poverty guidelines and to create a self-sufficiency factor at the National League of Cities, and that resolution was passed. But in the comments opposed to my resolution, they said, well, that's LA just trying to steal all the money. Could you explain what that person was talking about? I mean, I know what they were talking about, but why did they say that?
Well, if you have, right now the federal poverty line doesn't look at regional differences in cost of living. So if you had a standard that actually incorporated regional costs of living, you would get more your fair share of state and federal funding. I mean, so.
And the other way to look at it would be that we would be shedding a light on where the poverty is the greatest, and therefore when we do spend money on poverty, we would be spending it more effectively to meet the need, as opposed to putting some arbitrary number on a funding formula like 200% above the median income level, which is just completely arbitrary. It doesn't mean anything. But the federal poverty guideline is arbitrary as well.
Exactly.
And so really it's a way for congressional leaders, quite frankly, to manipulate the system to get money without having to deal with the reality of poverty. And so those states that don't have as much poverty want to maintain poverty at a low level so they can get more money.
Exactly.
And that's why it's incumbent on Los Angeles with, you argue 37% of the population under the self-sufficiency factor and only 11.7% below the federal poverty guideline. It's incumbent on LA County. That's LA County, right?
Right.
It's incumbent on us to fight for a new federal poverty guideline. Now, it's not going to happen in a way that we immediately start shifting all these dollars. I mean,
right.
It would have dramatic impact throughout the nation. But I think most people who advocate in your community are talking about a period of time where we transition.
Exactly.
Just to get to the point where we have a clear picture. We're not looking to dramatically shift the dollar amounts, but to recognize that we want the money to go to people in poverty.
Exactly. And one way, I mean, you mentioned an important point that this has to happen over time. One way that we've thought about it in times of fiscal constraint like today, if you look at programs, for example, like food stamps, where eligibility is based on 100% of the federal poverty line or below, if you translate that to our family self-sufficiency standard and say, instead of basing eligibility on 100% of federal poverty, let's say it's 50% of the family standard. Don't change the dollars. We're not saying we're increasing who gets access to that particular program, but we're changing the language to show that there's a deficiency and that there's 50% of the population that's not getting this particular public good.
Just so that as policymakers, we know what we're doing.
And you know the impact of your public programs.
So we're basically shooting blind if we don't have accurate numbers.
And I think symbolically it's important in terms of language because you look at things like the Children's Health Insurance, S-CHIP. President Bush vetoed S-CHIP because he said we'd be subsidizing middle-income, high-income families because income eligibility was put at 300% of the federal poverty line in some states. Well, if you put three times poverty seems like a lot of money to the general public, right? And it's sort of general, people who aren't experts on this, they think they're okay. But that's $30,000 for a single person in LA. And so if instead of saying 3 times some artificial number that isn't grounded in today's goods and services, do some percentage, a lower percentage of a more realistic standard, you're changing the frame of the debate.
Well, I think the city council passed the resolution essentially supporting your general premise, but we need more information I think all of us need more education about this concept, and so I really appreciate you. We hope that you will help us write the document and incorporate it in. So any additions or corrections or information or even statistical charts that might demonstrate a better understanding of this self-sufficiency notion would be very helpful to us. And and this, of course, is great. All this stuff is, you've done so much of this work, and what we're trying to do is capture this in the context of ending poverty in Los Angeles. So we're hoping to use all this. At the same time, we do want to put that face on it. Now, one thing I do want to talk to you about is how do we get to, or is there a nexus between employers and any goal that they should have to create a self-sufficiency standard? Is there a rationale for employers to want to see this happen?
Well, certainly in terms of retaining your workforce, and if you pay, you get what you pay for, right? So if you're paying low wages, there's always going to be incentive for people to be looking for another job. So there's a productivity loss in the higher rates of turnover you have in some of the service sector jobs that are very low wage, because of the fact that you're not going to want to stay if you can get a better opportunity. So certainly we think that the turnover costs, there are things, if you're paying below the self-sufficiency standard, then you're having to cut short on certain areas. And so things, for example, childcare. More likely that you do not have reliable childcare, which again, you have a childcare crisis that impacts your worker productivity. Transportation. If your housing is so unaffordable that you have to commute a couple hours to get to work, and you're not getting paid that self-sufficiency wage, then you have a tractor trailer turnover on the freeway. You come to late work. I mean, there's implications from a productivity standpoint that we think are important and that are good to study. We think that in terms of prioritizing city contracting and looking at least as a criteria, are these contractors paying close to the self-sufficiency wage?
In a perfect world, those are good things to argue, but if you think about it, to play devil's advocate, somebody who's paying low wages, they can move to a community where the poverty level is lower. Even the self-sufficiency factor is lower, and pay wages that accomplish the same thing.
There's a couple points there. One,
we don't want that to happen.
We don't want that to happen. There's certain kinds of jobs, though, that can never move, right? Your service sector economy, that you need restaurant workers, they can't be exported. There's certain kinds of jobs that are low wage, but that can't move and that do have a high turnover, and that does impact productivity. But I think the city has a role in terms of the kinds of public subsidies you offer. There's so many different incentives, tax incentives, subsidies to attract certain kinds of businesses to your community. To the extent that you're looking at, are we attracting the kinds of industries and occupations that actually bring self-sufficiency wage jobs to our community? And I think that's an important criterion that some of the workforce investment boards have used.
I'm hopeful that you and Kent will help us on. What I want to articulate in this document is why just any job won't do. They must be good paying jobs, because in fact creating masses of minimum wage jobs is contributing to poverty. Right. And even if there's dual income, they're not self-sufficient. And so we haven't been able to sell that. Politicians typically say we're creating more jobs, but they don't say what kind of jobs. And we need to, I remember when we had this debate, in fact Wendy was a part of it by way of being in HUD at the time, after the earthquake, and we created the Community Economic Development Bank, and Mike Hernandez and I were fighting to incorporate living wage standard into the loans, and we were told by the federal, I believe it was the banking folks, that we could not do that, and by virtue of that, I believe it went bust, because we weren't investing in quality jobs. It eventually got ripped off on a different level, but the point is that we need to do a better job of articulating why good wages help the community. Nobody seems to argue that in the entertainment industry it works. Nobody seems to argue that in the construction industry it works. Well, sometimes. But nobody seems to argue that in high-paying businesses that we become familiar with, like health services, that it works. We need to, that people will as Ford said, I need my workers to be able to pay for the cars that they're building, and so but we need to create that as part of this document. I'm looking for you.
Of course, a lot of people talk about
living wage,
Mhm,
you know, and you have here a self-sufficiency standard.
Mhm.
And how do you see comparing those? Because a lot of people now are saying we support living wage. What's different between the two in your definition?
Well, the way that we come up with our wage is based on the actual costs in the real market. So we're taking median costs of housing, transportation. Usually, our standard is higher than any living wage across the country. What you can use, though, as a way to raise the bar in the living wage debate, and we've certainly seen that in some of the communities in California. Actually, living wage ordinances, they've used the standard to show, to fight for to fight for a higher amount. And that's a great application too. Just like with the union, negotiation wages, it's sort of this tool to show this is the real cost, and this is how much below we're paying, and what the economic cost and the public cost. We did one study looking at what's the public cost of low wage work in terms of the benefits take-ups rates, and the state. There's one study. Our study showed that if you increase the minimum wage statewide from $8 an hour to $10 an hour, you would save the state over $1 billion in public expenditures.
Mr. Wong, I wanted to ask you, one of the challenges, obviously, the primary motivation for being involved in labor or being involved in a union is to have somebody advocating something, so it's sort of a third party advocating for you, so you don't have to go directly to your boss and ask them for a raise or ask them for health benefits or something. The immigrant community, people like my stepmother, who was a child care provider in the underground economy. Two of my staff members' mothers were child care givers in the homes of one of them was Tony Danza's kids, and the other one was some other TV show. Yet they can't communicate with each other, so it's very hard to organize that. What do we have to do to send the message about sort of personal responsibility, corporate responsibility, business responsibility to society to get better wages and better protections for these folks?
Well, what's very positive about the work you're doing through this hearing on poverty and through the work you've done over the years is to really elevate this conversation, to put a human face to it, to showcase the workers who are locked in these low-wage jobs, and to enter this conversation into the public debate, where it is unacceptable for employers to continue to pay poverty wages. And
so what I'm really trying to get at is how many? There must be 10,000 women who are immigrants who are working in the homes of wealthy Los Angelinos and taking care of their kids. And yet the employer is thinking, well, I'm just going to pay the least I have to pay, or what everybody else is paying. Well, everybody else is paying below minimum wage and or barely minimum wage and not providing any benefits. So how do we capture, how do we shed a light on them and say, hey, wait a minute, you're not playing fair, and you're undermining opportunities for our community to do better. And yet, we're taking care of their kids, their most precious contribution, you would hope.
it is through public education. It is through raising the voices of those low-wage workers to provide them an opportunity to speak about what it is like living in Los Angeles on a minimum wage. And it's also to provide opportunities for those workers themselves to organize. This coming Saturday at the Downtown Labor Center, we are bringing together leaders of some of the key campaigns that are organizing immigrant workers, from the port truckers to the janitors to the hotel workers to the laundry workers to the home care workers to the day laborers to the car wash workers. And we're providing a forum for them to share their own experiences about how they are successfully organizing, the challenges that they faced, and to provide support for this new generation of union organizers who are stepping to the forefront. I think that that would be a tremendous contribution to begin to provide direct support and assistance to these very workers who are trying to improve their lives and to improve the lives of members of their communities.
Well, we want to, I just want to say, what I want to accomplish, and I know Ms. Gruhl agrees, we want this document, the master plan, to to literally include it as part of the strategy, that because they are such an important segment of our economy, and particularly when you're talking about taking care of our children, they're educators. They're literally teaching the social values to the kids. If we are not paying them correctly, I'm not exactly sure what kind of values these kids are going to grow up with.
If I may add also, Churla has worked to organize the household workers. It's not something that's an easy task by any means. But nevertheless, Churla has been successful, and we have taken household workers to like national conferences where they talk to women in New York who are also in the same field. So it's definitely possible to bring these women out of the shadows per se, and to give them a voice and know what their rights are, because a lot of these women don't know what their rights are, and I think the information, just for them to be informed along, obviously with the public, would ensure more protections for themselves and kind of making their voices heard also at a legislative level, at a state level, at a national level.
Okay, well, I want to keep us focused on the master plan document because, again, we're not taking away from anybody else's work. We're developing a strategy for the city of Los Angeles, and we need you to tell us those anecdotal stories about what has worked. We need to demonstrate that so that we can multiply it. But we also need individual stories. I'm sure you have a bunch of individual stories. Your examples in here are perfect. And then I need your help on explaining the self-sufficiency factor, because it's a little difficult for people to understand. Self-sufficiency, well, your self-sufficiency is not like my self-sufficiency.
Right.
You know, I drive somebody says I drive a Prius and you drive a Cadillac, and it's a whole different thing. But essentially, to me, it's a fundamental discussion about what is the American dream. And I don't think 31% home ownership rate in Los Angeles is really contributing to the American dream. It's actually minimizing the American dream. And so that's part of it, is defining what we think Los Angeles ought to be in terms of an acceptable standard, not just a minimum standard, but an acceptable standard to really say we're proud of our city. Each of you are doing incredible work, and we really appreciate you coming in. We hope that you will not just look at this section of our document, but as we write the different sections of the document, we would appreciate your input, and we take no pride in ownership. Okay, we take some pride in I am an elected official. But we appreciate any embellishment and anything you can add. It's educational for us, and it helps contribute to all these sections. So we will continue to keep you in our partnership and keep you close. As we develop working groups, we may call upon your services. I hope you will be able to participate. But for today, thank you so much. The one thing I did want to say is I would also like to articulate in this document this whole notion of labor's role in our society, and the advocacy role, and what the reduction in the proportion of workers who have union representation means to quality of life.
That's great. I'd be happy to contribute to that.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next topic is the union's role in middle-class careers and living wages, contributing to good-paying jobs in the new sector development, just the stuff I was talking about, implementation of OSHA, contributing to professional development and career opportunities. The myth is unions no longer play an important role in our economy. And we have Kevin Norton here from the LA County Federation of Labor, Madeline Janice Aparicio from Lane, and Veronica Soto from the LAUSD Pre-Apprenticeship Program. So we will start with Kevin.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Alarcon and Councilmember Gruhl. Thank you for inviting me. I represent IBEW Local 11, not County Federation Labor. I was a last-minute substitution for Myung Soo Suk, so that's why there's a typo there.
Thank you.
The simple solution is making these jobs new jobs, these new green tech jobs, union jobs. We can ensure the workers earn more wages and benefits than workers that are not represented by a union. The only way unions can assure that the workers in the new sectors, such as green tech and expanding service, retail industry, receive middle-class wages is to aggressively organize workers in the industry and increase market share. Secondly, unions need to be part of the conversation on green-collar jobs. If labor is not involved in the discussion, there's a great risk that the needs of working families won't be addressed. And I would add that we'll also have missed a great opportunity that truly is once in a generation. The technology in my industry, construction, may be greening, but the skills needed for green construction still have their roots in industry occupations. And I'll give an example. In order for a worker to install solar panels, half of the installation is traditional electrician's work, running pipe and terminating wire at the panel and the inverter, and the portion that's new is installing the panels. The question we need to ask in our document is, do we really need to add the occupation of a panel installer, or do we need to expand the job of electrician? And I would add that we want to expand the job of the electrician, having trained 4,000 electricians statewide and to do this kind of thing. But that's the debate going on underneath the surface in the new green technology. Is it going to be a low wage new jobs, or are they going to be high road new jobs? The LA County Building Construction Unions spend up to $90 million a year to train both apprentices and incumbent journeymen. For the most part, this is privately funded, paid by the contractors and the labor organizations. This is a huge public benefit of the unionized construction industry. Workers learn skills that allow them to be safer on the job, more productive, and properly utilize new green technologies. I also think it's important to talk about the public subsidies involved in the need to extract community benefits such as prevailing rate and local hiring in a systematic manner when you're talking about the green economy. An issue that's not often addressed is the green tech sector is not possible without subsidies. The renewable market is presently heavily subsidized by taxpayer money, not just in the U.S., but in Japan and Germany as well. There's virtually no green technologies that are not seeking government subsidies to make the technology pay off for the customer. I argue that what we need to do is make these subsidies pay off for the public as well. In California, solar panel installation is subsidized locally by the Million Solar Roof Initiative, federal grants, as well as DWP incentives, which, of course, are a public subsidy as well. A typical residential solar panel installation is $45,000 on a home. $20,000 of that is subsidized from various sources. The workers in residential solar installation are paid $8 to $15 an hour with very little benefits. The supervisor on the project is often $17 to $25 an hour, and if you compare that to commercial or industrial solar panel installations with an IBEW contractor, the apprentice has starting pay of $20 an hour with wages and benefits, and the journeyman electrician has a wage and benefit package of $52 an hour. As you see, and that only begins to paint a picture. There's presently very little solar training that's going on outside of my organization, the IBEW, and what little is being done by public institutions such as the community college district. Let's go back and discuss the workers on that residential solar job site that is covered by a 45% government subsidy. The IBEW fought to have these projects covered by the prevailing rate since the jobs have a 45% subsidy. Unfortunately for the workers, we lost that battle statewide, but they probably don't have health benefits or a pension. They also earn much less than the prevailing rate for any of the trades in construction, not just the IBEW, and the contractor is very likely to operate in the underground economy. So we're subsidizing the project. However, we're not solving the need for training or developing a world-class workforce. We're not creating high-road jobs, and we're not developing good employers as well. The employers that are high-road contractors don't have an opportunity to play in that sector because they don't cheat. To ensure the green sector has good jobs, we need to make sure that if they're using public money, they're covered by the prevailing rate. If they're not construction jobs in the green sector, we need to make sure they have a living wage or provide benefits. We also need to make sure these local jobs are for local people. Local hiring should always be a priority. Finally, green jobs are only good jobs if we make them good jobs. Just because they're green doesn't mean they're a good job. Most people agree that we need to move forward towards a greener future, and I would be the first person to stand in that line, but that's another discussion. The actual jobs the workers will be involved with will either be good union jobs or low-wage non-union jobs. Again, I can't emphasize enough Despite the fact that these are going to be heavily subsidized projects, there will be a great temptation to try to jam these initiatives through without community benefits for workers, local jobs, or the prevailing rate. And we have a similar situation in the low-income housing sector, where there's a great emphasis to push it through, and they do great work, but there's also a tremendous amount of poverty created by the construction projects that are involved. You have an example from Kent Wong of a high road career policy, the LACRA's construction careers policy. The highlights are private development with over $1 million. City subsidies are required to sign a PLA that assures both full utilization of union and local labor. 30% of the workers are from LA City zip codes with high unemployment. 10% are local low-income apprentices. This assures that a new stream of workers have an opportunity to enter into good career paths. There's no significant increase in cost for the developers because the projects are already prevailing rate. There's a significant, but there is a significant increase in the public benefit by having local apprenticeships and local jobs tied to the monies that would be spent anyway and recycled back into the community where they were derived from in the first place. There's absolutely no reason to believe we cannot achieve the same results with a policy pertaining to the green initiatives in any other publicly subsidized green industry.
You've introduced an interesting concept that I don't know that we have really explored, and that is when we have competing interests, and how do you define the right thing to do? I recently worked on a project, and the community did a survey, and the question was, what is your priority? Jobs, and they had all these factors. The number one priority was jobs. The fifth priority was the environment. And yet leadership cries out to do both. And so I think we're going to have to incorporate some language about the competing interests of building an economy of the future that is green, that promotes health and all kinds of other things. At the same time, that is not undermined by a low-wage workforce that is creating that green economy. That's an interesting question. That's just one of the competing interests. But thank you very much. And we hope that the County Federation of Labor will continue to be partners with us. Of course, I know you work very closely with the Labor Center, and that's sort of the academic group, and we will work closely with all of them. Also, you spoke of very specific new initiatives. As we move forward, we want long-term strategies.
Sure.
We feel like ending poverty is more like turning the Titanic than turning a speedboat. So let's, if we could keep that in mind, we can figure this out for the long term. But thank you very much. Madeline, Janice, sorry.
Right.
I keep doing
Well, it's because that wasn't my name for a really long
it.
time,
I know,
so
it was.
shows how far we go back.
We don't have that problem.
Yeah.
And that's another thing.
Just so you know,
Exactly.
I've known her longer than you.
Do it?
I've known her longer than you.
Really?
We went to
Junior
junior
high.
high school together.
Wow. Did you really?
We did.
That is hilarious.
We did. Thank you very much for inviting me.
You went to junior high school with all kinds of people.
I know, yeah.
Want to hear
Really
who
good
else?
people, so.
Good. Good.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for providing this document.
I'm going to walk through it very briefly. I wanted to compliment you, Councilmember Alarcon, on your good staff work, because I had a whole presentation prepared with lots of statistics, and when I got David's good, healthy push, I threw that in the trash, and I read your document, and I'm here today with some very specific suggestions
Great, thank you.
for, based on many, many years of experience in the city, what the city can do very directly to lift, I believe, hundreds of thousands of families out of poverty. I think
Now,
if
the
we
one
do...
thing I do want to point out at the onset, and you can go back and do it again, but we don't want to restrict it to what the city per se can do, the city government. We do need to have a conversation about what all the other players have to do.
Well, this is...
So it is. We will be making recommendations that aren't necessarily within the context of the city.
Well, when I say what the city can do, I mean the city using all of its powers.
Okay.
I mean the city using its police powers, its land use powers, its economic development powers, its contracting, and other relationships. So you start with a very big program. You realize with all the powers that the city of Los Angeles has and has exercised in the past, the city of LA itself can have a dramatic impact on the lives and on just the level of poverty and the lives of so many people. So I think you're actually in an amazing place. And this is a wonderful initiative to try to bring it together. Two things I wanted to say very quickly is thank you very much for inviting me. Since I'm a city commissioner, I just wanted to make it clear that I am not here lobbying, that as an invitation I'm coming in response to that would not count as lobbying. So just in case anyone was wondering. And I also wanted to just say on the outset,
We may invite you back.
anytime I'm happy to come, but otherwise I need to send somebody else. Having done this for 25 years, I have worked, and being a lawyer myself in my past, I have worked with the wonderful city attorney's office many times, and many of the things I'm going to talk to you about and many of the things that are in your draft, I am sure the city attorney will say are not legal. So my many years of experience, there are ways around many things, and the city has a lot of flexibility to do really good things, maybe in slightly different ways than we might originally think. So I just wanted to be encouraging about looking for flexibility and alternatives legally.
And we sometimes disagree with the city attorney's office in their opinions.
Right,
So.
absolutely. So
And being a legislator, former legislator, we also account for changing the law.
exactly. But there's some things about federal law that we can't yet change, and so we need to be creative, as we have been, to get around that. So I have 4 sets of recommendations.
I want to be very clear. Part of this document will encourage legislative change at the federal level or whatever level. So while we certainly want to be able to have an action plan that includes short-term sort of things to get around the legal dilemmas to get to a solution. We also want to suggest things that need to change in the law. I'll give you one example that you'll be very familiar with, and that is I would absolutely think that our society as a whole would be so much better if we reverted back to a time when one board member couldn't sue another board member because they want to do something for the public good and not for the bottom line of their investor. Currently, they can get sued if they do that. And if we just change that one thing, I think you would see far and away much more corporate giving on a large scale. But that's just one example that undermines massive involvement in positive community endeavors.
Well, I do think that everything we're doing in the city, and all of us have been doing in the last 10 years in the city, can be greatly enhanced with changes at the federal level. So, to put it nicely. So, our recommendations really come in 4 categories, and these are really 4 opportunities that the city is using already and can use to a greater impact to dramatically lift large numbers of people out of poverty. And those recommendations are listed here on this first page. The first thing is to use the public ownership of major infrastructure, such as the port, the airports, and DWP being the 3 largest. The second is to strengthen some of the city contracting rules that are already in effect, that are already some of the best in the country, but can really, by strengthening, can really make a difference. The third is really knitting together an overarching program around economic development, so that when developers complain that we're sticking it to them or we're exacting things, quote unquote, on a project by project basis, sometimes they're right. In many ways, it would be ideal for us to have a large overarching vision for how we use our considerable economic development resources and powers to dramatically lift communities out of poverty. And the third thing is to carefully and judiciously, but actively use land use, zoning, and police powers, focusing on core industries to really create industry standards when we believe it's essential. And I'll give a couple of examples in that. So in terms of the port, huge opportunity. 40% of global trade come in and out of the LA and Long Beach port, as you know, and LA is the largest. And just the Clean Trucks program alone, which the council unanimously adopted last month, will lift 16,000 families, truck drivers and their families, out of poverty. That alone is going to have an enormous impact. There are a couple of other things that the city can do through the ports. 15 expansion projects that are queuing up right now, $8 billion worth of improvements, both on private terminals and public. If we have a construction careers policy in place, we'll make sure that those are good construction jobs for local people. And if we have community benefits agreements that are negotiated with the surrounding community, like the one in the Trade Pack terminal, but even better, we can, there right alone, we can, 30,000, 40,000 families can be lifted out of poverty. Huge opportunity. On the airports, we've all been working in the airports together for many years to try to make that airport experience when we catch a plane, looking around and see all these workers making a living wage and having health care is something where we can feel really good about. We're getting there, but there's still 6,000 passenger service workers who are making low wages and have insufficient training, and where we need a lot of work done. There's something called the Service Standards Policy, which is now making its way through Department of Airports. There was a community benefits agreement, that $500 million community benefits agreement that was negotiated 3 or 4 years ago. The FAA, talk about a need for federal change. The FAA has been holding up implementation of the very ambitious job training program, and hopefully, and the city has been less than fully active in actually trying to get that decision of the FAA overturned. I think that would go a long way toward, again, opening up good airport jobs to local people.
Could you describe that program a little bit? Are you aware of this program?
The community benefits agreement was negotiated around the modernization of the airport in, I believe, 2005.
Right.
And it was approved by the city council, and it was a $500 million package that was then later incorporated into the settlement when a couple of the surrounding cities sued around the modernization. And it included $200 million to actually upgrade schools. It included $100 million or so in environmental.
Specifically talk about the job training.
And then it included $15 million for job training related to, there was a local hire program that was set up, all living wage jobs, a local hire program that was, pipeline, a lot of work went into it. And then connected to that program was supposed to be this $15 million that the airport has identified in job training funds to actually make sure that people they get training and they become career paths. And the FAA opined that this was a diversion of resources, even though we're talking about contractors working on airport property. So the FAA is blocking the Department of Airports from spending this $15 million on training all these folks for all of the higher skilled jobs that exist at the airport that no one is getting trained for. So that's one thing.
Thank you.
The last thing, which really applies to citywide, but it could be started at the airports alone. When the living wage ordinance was originally adopted, and Councilmember Alarcon was one of our original supporters on that, the wage was actually set at a family of 4 at the poverty line. So poverty line, family of 4 with a CPI attached. So, and then there was a healthcare differential, because the idea that the council had was, let's incentivize, can't require it because of federal law, let's incentivize family health care. And unfortunately, it was set at $1.25 without a CPI or any kind of measure. So now $1.25 buys nothing. So the opportunity to go back and actually come up with a measure of what a family health plan costs and set it at that could provide health care for another 10,000 families. Just that in and of itself. So that's something that we urge you to look at. There are some other recommendations here with other departments that you can look at, and other really interesting programs that make this linkage that Kevin was talking about between green jobs, good environmental practices, and good paying jobs. And there is no reason, I think we showed this in the ports campaign, there is no reason why we can't have both. And in fact, we need to have both, because poverty and pollution are the two seminal problems of our age, and we need to be addressing them together. So I'll just go on to economic development very quickly.
I know you just
Sure.
you went by this one quickly, which was on the city contracting rules,
Yes.
which is something we've been pushing for in the past, both through public works contracts and others, and through some of the audits that the controller has done, is ensuring that there's some communication between the different departments, in particular the proprietary departments, as to poor contracting procedures. So it's something we're very interested in, and reminds me we need to check where they are on ensuring that there is that kind of information sharing and position that we took in the past, which said if you are not following the rules, that you are barred at some point from participating.
I put that in here because it's been a problem that's come up repeatedly.
And
We
it's
have
implementation,
a responsible contractor ordinance
Right.
that the City Council adopted in 2000, but it's missing, it's very weak, and it's missing that essential element of you get barred
Right.
if you mess it up. And so that would be something, I think, that would send a message to, 2,000 companies real quickly. Economic development, as I mentioned, when I first went in as a commissioner at the CRA in 2002, I was gung-ho to, really see an agency that had a reputation of, lining the pockets of greedy developers, et cetera, and not really helping communities, turned into really an engine for community development. And what I realized is that in a lot of ways, the criticism of government as being, inefficient and bad is wrong, but in a lot of ways, there's something to it, and there's such a need to come up with an overarching vision and purpose, and really try and instill a sense of mission in our employees, and that was something that I realized immediately at the CRA was a challenge. And with economic development, it's especially important that we have a vision, that we say our goal is to take our money, and our considerable amount of money, $750 million at the CRA alone, let alone housing, the different housing departments, and make that an investment tool to achieve good jobs, to lift communities out of poverty, and actually make that an explicit goal of all of our investment, and then have the policies in place, some of which are in place and some of which aren't, to implement that. And that really would take leadership from the council and the mayor to really set because in state law, the goal of redevelopment is eliminating physical blight. It's not lifting families out of poverty. And it just seems so logical that we would take this huge investment, this huge resource that we have, which is actually taking money away in some ways from other essential services, to use that precious resource to deal with the seminal issue of our day, which is poverty, and in Los Angeles above all. So I think that would be very important. And then to use that as a tool, if we prioritize core industries, so say we prioritize industrial jobs and we make it green jobs, and we start with the first step, which I think is an excellent step, of the industrial development policy that's been put in place, or a program that's been put in place. Let's protect our precious industrial land to the greatest extent possible. And then if we're going to have conversion, let's have substantial community benefits. And let's take some of our money and let's go out there and find those good employers and find those green companies and make it possible for them to, make it easy for them to invest and build up on our industrial land. It sounds simple, but it's actually taken so much work to try to, get consensus on that. And from this document could be a very great way of persuading everyone in the city family that we need to come together and we need to say this is our mission and this is, these are our steps.
There's something, I'm not sure how apropos it is, but it's something that bothers me, and that is the continuous reduction in the proportion of people who own their homes in our city. Last year, I think it was at 31%. I suspect it's less now, but the city has never really grappled with the notion that we need to fight to increase the proportion of home ownership in our city. We always say we need to do more affordable housing. It's sort of like this buzzword. Well, what does affordable housing mean? It means you're paying your rent monthly, but you have no long-term asset that you can rely on when you're in a crunch. I mean, how many times those of us who grew up in relatively working class, middle class environments. How many times was it the fact that our parents owned a home that got us out of a jam by virtue of them taking a loan out or whatever? If you're renting and you have a society that's almost 70% renter, you have 70% of your society that cannot respond when they have a tragedy, or when they have a divorce, or when they have a traffic accident, or an earthquake. And so it seems to me that that we need to tackle that notion. We can't be self-sufficient as long as we're paying rent. I really believe that that's a core value that this city has avoided for many, many years.
I agree, Councilman. I think there's a several-pronged approach to that. I think the first prong is putting more money in people's pockets and getting them health insurance so that they are more stabilized and can afford to buy. And then I do think there's strategies around our housing program. Part of it is, there's a few people that made so much money, and we didn't ask them to give anything back. We didn't ask the 20,000 units that got built, luxury units, we didn't ask them to do, 500 for sale at a workforce level. We could have done that. And I still think we can do it because we're going to have the next wave. But it's not only what we pay.
There's a multitude of strategies that we could have, would have, should have, but they all start with the notion that we need to increase the home ownership as a proportion for our city. One of the pieces of legislation that I was successful in getting passed in the legislature was the Cal Home program, specifically intended to create home ownership. It created 70,000 new homeowners in the state of California. But I can't tell you what impact that had as a proportion to our society. And I really think that unless we, in other words, when we are supporting, you know who the advocates are for affordable housing. They are typically nonprofits who have now sort of created the same corporate mindset that profit-making entities have. And to sustain themselves, it's like HAL in 2001 Space Odyssey. They just promote rental at all costs because that's what they need to get the revenues to sustain their administration.
I don't think that's the only reason they're.
I've negotiated a lot of these deals, and I'm telling you that I have had way too many nonprofit housing developers come to me on a property that was intended in the community plan to be a home ownership project and articulate and argue and fight and politically vilify people who say no, it needs to be home ownership as opposed to a low-income rent. And they'll say, no, it's just NIMBYs out there that don't want renters to come in. But in fact, we may have a broader picture. So that's something we need to grapple with.
I agree with that, and I think there's more we can do.
As I talked about competing interests, that's a competing interest we need to deal with as a city. To what extent can we rent out this city? Are we going to say enough at 80%, at 20%? I mean, at 80% or 90%? We're moving downwards, and we're at 30%. At some point, this city needs to realize when you talk about the haves and have-nots, we're talking about literally that 30% of the people have something they own in this city. 70% have something that somebody else owns.
Well, when you talk about urban blight, people who don't own their own house don't go out and paint it.
Exactly. I mean, any construction worker knows that you put less time into a property you don't own. But anyway, I went off sort of in a tangent, but I would.
It's very relevant.
I particularly want the CRA to help us write the document to include that concept, to talk about that concept in all candor.
I think that's very important. The last thing I would just say is the last prong of the strategy can be and has been looking at core industries and looking at core industries that are so vital to the health and welfare of the city that justifies taking a bolder action. And so, for example, what you've done around the hotels around the airport is you used your police powers to create a zone around the airport, said this zone is so important and is such an opportunity to actually lift people out of poverty and move them into close to the middle class and really lift a whole community out of poverty, that we're going to use our police powers to do that and create this living wage in this economic development zone. Another opportunity, and I wanted to make sure you had copies of a report that was released by a Blue Ribbon Commission on the grocery industry last week. I'll hand this to your staff. The idea being the grocery industry is wreaking havoc in many ways with all of our communities. The price of food, the fact that good grocery stores aren't locating in so many communities, and the fact that grocery jobs are really going downward spirals, faster than we can open and close our eyes, and that you have an opportunity to set a standard for that industry. And so in the coming months, there's going to be a number of people coming to you and talking to you about ideas for this creative new approach. I'm gonna leave it at that. I had, as requested by your staff, included a worker profile of a worker who's been fighting port driver, whose life is going to be amazingly and dramatically improved soon, but who has been suffering from all the challenges that we've been talking about today.
Thank you so much. This is good stuff, and we will hopefully be able to utilize Lane to help us continue to write this document, and we particularly appreciate you taking the time. And there's nothing wrong with a CRA commissioner coming in as a formal representative, as long as they say it's not the CRA's position or something like that. I want your input. I don't care what. We just have to be careful with, not representing something that you can't represent.
It's not only that, because you invited me here as a representative of Lane, and the prohibition that the mayor put into place a couple of years ago actually is an absolute prohibition on any commissioner even speaking to a council member or a member of the city family on a matter that's pending.
Well, I'm sorry, but I disagree. I think if any commissioner wants to talk to a city council member, they're entitled to with their civil rights, and I'm sorry, but I don't think he has that power.
Well, no, I appreciate that.
Okay, our next speaker is Esmeralda Lopez.
That's
no,
from-
I used
That was
Veronica
the last
Soto.
petal. Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry,
It's okay.
from the Director of Contractor Relations with LAUSD.
Well, thank you for the invitation to comment on not only your draft plan, but also to kind of give an overview of what we've been able to do at LAUSD. Obviously, we've had the privilege of having the largest building program in the country, $20 billion, and obviously with $20 billion program, labor is key to its success. And I think that because of that, we've been able to establish certain tools. One of them obviously was a contracting tool. The other was a project labor agreement. And finally, our whole workforce development strategy that we've employed in order to ensure that we would be able to meet the challenges of a large construction program. There were two major challenges that we faced. One of them was labor capacity, and the other one was contractor capacity. And so for both those challenges, we implemented policies for small business participation, and then also one for local worker participation. The first, the small business participation, I believe is the beginning of our workforce development strategy, because if you train small contractors or small businesses and you help them understand not only public contracting and the benefits of prevailing wage work, then they will actually provide greater benefit to their own employees, and they will be more conscientious about hiring local. And in most cases, small contractors are local. So you're actually killing two birds with one stone, and as a public agency, it's an easy accomplishment to actually achieve. With our small business program, the Board of Education early on, I would say that was in 2003, they implemented a 25% small business goal. Since that point in time, we've awarded $1.46 billion to small contractors.
When you say small business and small contractors, what are we talking about?
We're using the U.S. Small Business Administration size standards. And in most cases, our projects for small contractors range from anywhere from a few $1,000s all the way to about $1.5 to $2 million. In most cases, our small contracts are at that size.
But what is the small business? It can be, what's the largest number of employees a small business can have?
For construction, we don't use number of employees, we use revenue. And for a specialty
So-
trade, it's $13 million, and we take
$13 million?
$13 million For
Annual
special
revenue, or-
Annual revenue, and we take a 3-year average. And then for
Is that,
general,
I'm sorry, is that profit?
total revenue. So
Gross income?
this is gross income. So obviously, if you're a contractor, you're making $13 million, but in
Or less.
reality, you're paying your suppliers, you're paying your
Okay,
subcontractors,
so, but 13 million, you're considering that a small business?
based on the SBA
Okay.
size standards.
Okay.
So we-
Now, I want to distinguish, and I would ask you, encourage you, and we will have language about this in the document. I introduced the measure to define micro-business in our community. 63% of all new business in California in the year, I think it was 2004, 2005, were created by micro-businesses, businesses with fewer than 5 employees. And the reason for the bill was to incorporate that as a definition into the policies of the state of California, because prior to that, they were not included and could not compete, notwithstanding the fact the federal government recognized micro businesses and would provide specific allocations to micro businesses. So I would encourage LAUSD to create a micro business program, because those are truly local people. And the sad fact is that 90% of them fail in the first year. More than 60% of them are women, and the majority of them are immigrants, first-generation immigrants. So when you hear all the testimony that we've heard today, it would be a great opportunity if we could create a subset on your small business program to incorporate micro business. Whenever I have the chance, I talk about it. So I'm sorry to make you suffer through that, but it would be great if you could look at that as a policy.
Well, actually, we looked at it beyond just a policy measure, because we actually have a program geared for small contractors. We're talking about owner-operators, individuals that maybe only have 2 employees. So we've already done that.
Okay, if you could do it in the context of micro enterprise, that's a legal definition, I would appreciate it.
Well,
If you could give me, if you have something like that, if you could give it back to us so we could incorporate it as an example into the document.
Well, I'd be happy to provide our small business policy and maybe even provide data as to who are the contractors and their size and scope, as to who's actually getting these contracts, and you will recognize that most of them are micro.
Great.
So we're actually very confident about reaching out to the true small business in the LA area, specifically those within the district boundaries. And like I said, we do have a small business boot camp program that's geared to train our contractors on how to do business with the public sector, which I think is instrumental in creating access not only for small contractors, but also for minority contractors. Because the number one reason why they don't do business with public agencies is because they're truly intimidated. And the other thing is that they don't understand, what are the public contracting procedures in order to be successful.
When a business wants to contract with LAUSD, do they go directly to, is there one place they go to fill out a form to qualify for RFPs, for example?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
We actually have put everything under one umbrella so that a small contractor that's interested in doing business with us, they can actually do so. In fact, the City of Los Angeles has participated in the program by actually sitting in the workshops to determine what it is that they can actually duplicate for the City of Los Angeles. Metro has done the same thing. The
To do
community
what?
excuse me?
To do what?
To duplicate some of the efforts that we have ongoing in order to basically build the capacity of our small contractors. The city's Public Works Department has done it, the Community College District, Metro has done it, and I think Lane is familiar with some of the work we've been doing. Obviously, Labor is, because Labor also participates in our program. But this is a program that has basically cultivated a whole new cadre of small contractors that before were excluded from doing business. And by training them, they in turn hire local, which means that we increase the local participation of local workers. The other area where we've done a lot is in basically addressing the issue of labor capacity. When we started off with this building program, we recognized that the only way we were going to accomplish it is by having the skilled labor available to us, and which is why we have a project labor agreement in place. Within that project labor agreement, we stipulated a 50% local worker goal, because obviously we wanted to ensure that with the $20 billion program, not only the contractor community understood that there was a real commitment from the Board of Education, but that labor the unions would be a partner in this effort. And since its beginning in first part of 2004, that new project labor agreement has been instrumental in increasing the level of participation. When you look at the composition of our workforce on our projects, we're looking at 32% local, which is over 12,000 workers out of 39,000. And the average hourly wage is $27.82, which is far beyond the living wage, or to a certain degree the whatever wages we're looking at in Los Angeles, but it is above prevailing wage and minimum wage. So we're very confident that by partnering with labor through a project labor agreement, we as public agencies can really not only cultivate a workforce, but also ensure that there's good pay, there's benefits, and a pension tied into that. And when you do that locally, it creates a sense that if we're changing one worker in one home, we're changing the life of one of our students. And by doing that on a multiple level, then we're actually changing neighborhoods. And obviously after that, we're changing communities. So we've been able to do that through our project labor agreement. We do have a pre-apprenticeship construction training program. We have 7 training facilities throughout the district, 2 on the east side, 2 in the valley, 1 in South LA, 1 in Watts, and 1 in the harbor. And by being able to provide a 10-week pre-apprenticeship construction training program, we've been able to provide access to individuals who want to begin a career in construction. Once they graduate from that program, we match them with the union, the appropriate union, or replace them through our general contractors and our subcontractors in order to provide that person a gateway to union apprenticeship. That obviously is a career path. It's not a job. That means that we'll have sustainable economic benefits associated with our building program. And in most cases, these individuals are the parents, they're the uncles, they're the cousins, or the neighbors of our student body. So we want to ensure that we recycle those dollars. $20 billion, we created a study as to what is the true economic impact of a $20 billion program. And it's $12 billion in wages, $1.2 billion in local and state taxes, which means those are then recycled back into the community through fire and fire, life safety, and also other services that the city provides. But by doing that, we've been able to recycle those dollars that these taxpayers actually voted on, and now we're recycling those dollars and creating jobs. We're creating capacity for small contractors to grow. Since the inception of our small business policy, we've had contractors grow out of the small business status, which means that's a true success, because then you're actually building capacity. One of the other areas that there's a great opportunity now is in the area of green. All of our schools, our new schools, are basically being built under CHIPS, which is the Collaborative for High Performance Schools, which is the equivalent for LEED. Which means that everything, will be energy efficient, and then in turn, obviously, create lower costs for maintenance and operations for the long-term basis of our schools, which is a true benefit because those dollars can then be recycled and put into other operational costs for the school district. One of the other areas where we've been able to capitalize on our project labor agreement as well as our contracting tools is also working with our industry is our architecture and engineering internship program, because we believe that we need to start in our K through 12 in order to cultivate that skilled worker or skilled engineer or skilled architect or skilled construction manager, because only then are we preparing our students for a middle class life. If we do not expose them at an early age, we will lose these kids because they will not take the A through G classes that were required in high school in order to continue their education, whether it be the Cal State system or the UC system. So it's imperative that we have a coordinated effort between our public works programs and then our workforce development, whether that be in partnership with labor, and then at the same time have a curriculum for our high school students, and in some cases our middle school kids, so that we're gearing them toward this pipeline, because we're only going to get out what we put in. So if we start early enough, we'll get a lot more out. When we look at our architecture and engineering program, we decided that it wasn't just good to introduce our kids or to mentor our kids into these industries, but to also provide a real curriculum for them. So we created the IC Architecture and Engineering Internship Program, and our students not only have access to the industry, they have 5 monthly seminars on Saturdays, but they're also enrolled in college. So our students are enrolled in a college credit class where they get 3 units of AutoCAD. And as of yesterday, our kids are actually performing internships, so they get paid to actually perform work with our architects, engineers, construction companies, as well as construction management companies. So what we're trying to do is cultivate, a skilled labor force, whether it be in the trades, whether it be in architecture, engineering, construction management, so that we know that when our students graduate from college or when they graduate from the apprenticeship program, that they're going to be an active member in the middle class. And we're going to recycle those dollars so that they in turn can provide their families with those opportunities that were actually offered to them. That has been our strategy right from the beginning, and now we're finally seeing the fruit of our labor by seeing the high level of local participation in our workforce, by seeing a high participation level of small contractors and also minority contractors. The diversity of Los Angeles is reflected in our workforce and also in our contracting. And then ultimately, we're changing the face of the industry by cultivating our young people to enter this industry, but not just in one area, but in multiple areas that still support the entire industry. Obviously, our program will conclude in 2012. If there's another bond, then we may, increase that time frame. But it's imperative that these efforts be sustained, and we look at our sister agencies, the city, the community college district, the Metropolitan Water District, to see what they can do in order to sustain that collaboration and that pipeline that we've created. Because LAUSD kids are still going to exist, regardless of whether we build these schools and improve our existing schools. The facilities division will continue to exist, but at a very smaller scale, which means that someone needs to sustain this, whether it be through policy, by incorporating this in your contracting policy, or making sure that there's a linkage between our high schools and our middle schools with our our sister agencies.
Veronica, I want to thank you. First of all, I think that all the programs you talk about related to the construction of the schools and taking the opportunity of the $20 billion to think about a broader vision that goes beyond building schools, but says, well, how else can this $20 billion help our community in terms of advancing individual opportunities? However, I draw a line at your statements that go beyond that, where you're talking about the school district. I am not satisfied with the success or lack of success of LA Unified in terms of, in fact, I heard Cortines on the radio just the other day saying that he was pleased with the 35% dropout rate. The mayor argues it's 50%, and I believe that the 35 is unacceptable. Your program is excellent, and I really do appreciate what you said. But if we could just teach our kids how to buy a house and how to get a loan, I think we would do far better than what we teach them in math now. And we're obviously failing at that because Los Angeles had the highest victimization rate on the foreclosure crisis in the entire nation. I think that does speak to the school district. And,
I agree with you.
The school district does have to claim responsibility for some of the social ramifications of their lack of providing education to those who would be the future workforce of America. So with regard to the programs as you design around contracting, thank you so much, particularly in the environment I just described. But it's also nice when the voters say, here's $20 billion, go do something with it, and then we get to figure out stuff. And we all know that the per capita spending in the school district does not allow the school district to make those same kinds of investments in the classroom that you're able to make in the contracting program. And so there are reasons for some of the failure in our school system, but I just want to, I have this particular bugaboo about school district officials always coming in painting a rosy picture about the things they're doing right and not talking about the things that are going wrong. I know of nothing but positive things about the construction program. And, we made one mistake, Belmont, but we learned from that mistake, and the school district, I think, is doing great work on construction. So thank you so much for describing that. It is a model that we would like to feature in terms of how to move forward with other public contracting projects, very similar to what Madeline was talking about, incorporating some of those values into future publicly financed construction projects and infrastructure development projects. You know, we're all learning together, and I think the school district has a great model. And by the way, one thing I would like to say, in the development of schools in my district that I've seen, whether it be as a senator, or which covers almost all of the, well, about 60% of the San Fernando Valley, the school district's community relations effort relative to its construction program has been light years ahead of where it was 10 years ago. And I believe it's the reason for the success. They worked with the community. And I think that is a good model. Very similar, again, to the community benefits agreement concept. We really have to, I believe, my dad lived in North Hollywood since he was 2 years old. He died at 85 a couple years ago. And I used to ask him, what do you think about development? He says, I think it's good. I like it. You know, I said, why? And he said, well, I want to be modern. I want to have access to things that other people have access to. I don't want to express that that's necessarily my broad opinion, but the point is that I believe our community just wants to be part of the equation. When I say our community, I'm talking about, you know, the disenfranchised communities, or the San Fernando Valley as a community, or they just want to be part of the equation. The neighborhood councils individually want to be part of the system. So to the extent we respect them, and usually they come up with better solutions, as I've seen in the school district. So I want to commend you for that. But we're going to have other discussions about education that we'll invite some of your colleagues to.
And you know, I think that even though, you know, obviously everything is geared around, you know, facilities, whether it be the new construction or the modernization, we've been able to look at what motivates some students. And I'll give you an example. I had a mother cry to me, and she said, this program changed my son. He didn't want to go to school. He was going to drop out of school. And now he's a happy guy. He comes in, he talks during dinner. I have a new son because of the IC program. And I'm thinking, if only, you know, we as sister agencies can say, look, this is what we're doing on a market level, but what can we do to stimulate, you know, our curriculum? What can we do to motivate our students to enter these new, you know, career paths, or to be a part of these new economies, such as the green economy? Yeah. What can we do? Because in some cases, you know, going to school, and maybe the way they're teaching it, I don't know, I'm not an instructor, but in some cases, kids are not motivated because they don't see a connection. And you're right, they want to be a part of the equation, but they don't know where they fit. So if we give them more exposure to different areas, maybe then they will find where they fit in that equation.
You're absolutely right, but I think it lies in our definitions of success. From kindergarten through the 12th grade, we pound into their heads that success is going to college, when in fact, as a society, only 35% of the people ever make it to college. That means that we're telling 65% of the people that they are not successful. We need to get rid of that definition of success and tell them there are other avenues to success. You probably had some college at least, probably graduated from college.
Degree, yeah.
But the vast majority of your members did not.
No.
And yet they are living very decent middle-class lifestyles, very successful people. And if we could get more kids to understand that you don't have to go to college to be successful, we need to change that definition of success, and I believe we can increase the penetration all the way through the 12th grade instead of burning kids out who know they'll never get to college, and therefore they drop out. But that's a whole different thing. Maybe a psychologist can come in and talk about that. Thank you so much.
Career technology education.
Thank this panel. Again, we hope that your participation here at the hearing just belies a greater involvement, and that when we can pick up the phone or call you and have specific meetings to help us craft a document that you think will be most helpful. I think all of you have a lot to contribute. Yes.
I just want to add one last thing. I apparently was too specific to my industry. I apologize. But if I could say one thing broadly, when we look at the green tech, I would just say take it out of the either-or paradigm, where you can only have a clean environment or good jobs, where we all need.
Believe me, I did.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
No problem,
Right
thank
on.
you. Okay, I'm going to have to move forward very quickly. My staff is pressing me, saying the last panel, and we have Deputy Mayor Larry Frank representing, obviously, the mayor. We have Raul Anorve?
Marvin Martinez.
No, Marvin Martinez. Raul Añorve. Thank you. Executive Director of EDEPSCA, and Marvin Martinez, Vice Chancellor of Economic Workforce Development for the Community College District. This conversation is about workforce development, ongoing professional development, increased coordination, a whole bunch of stuff, corporate responsibility included. We'd like to initiate this conversation, and I've taken most of your time, so we're going to have to continue this hearing for at least 20 minutes to 4:20, and I think I can still get to my my next appointment. Mr. Frank.
I could be extremely brief. You kind of know the work that we're doing here in the city, but I'll just pass it to you just so just to remind you. But I'm going to ask you to speak to both Mr. Anorve and Mr. Martinez, who I think are both great people to kind of get some perspective from. So, we do 6 major strategies in the city that we follow. We are doing a sector-based strategy with the $60 million we have in WIA Workforce Investment Act dollars. So we've gone from 1 training program to 13. You know some of the training programs that we're doing. Quite honestly, they're still boutique training programs unless we can actually grow them to scale. The only way we're going to get there is if we partner with those people that can get ADA dollars or apportionment dollars. Our key hope regionally, in my belief, is that the community college district is going to train our workforce for us over time. So strategy 2 is about building a regional system, and that has the MOU is the second page, where we've actually working closely for the last 12 months. We've been meeting every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, community college district, LAUSD, the county fed, the Chamber of Commerce, now LAEDC is at the table, United Way is convening the discussion, where we're doing systems work, and we're focusing on co-locating our facilities. We're looking on developing a single working group for each sector. So you'd be interested in this. We actually have identified key, workforce intermediaries that we want to be where the industry comes together to really do the kind of industry-driven training programs to connect up to the different training efforts. So on logistics, we really are going to invest in the work of Catley and LAEDC down at the port, where all the players are going to come together.
Essentially what you're saying is that you're focused on growth, job creation.
Yeah.
Industries where growth is highly probable.
That's right.
And
that aren't going to be going overseas, that pay living wage, that have
pay
career
good
ladders
wages.
and are still in the growth sector.
Why don't you tell us just what are the growth sectors that you want to focus on that have the greatest potential to stay in Los Angeles?
Yeah. So, healthcare has been a commitment for some time.
You can't send your doctors to China.
That's right. Absolutely not.
They got to be here.
Construction still, because of public sector commitments to construction, to the largesse of the public, right, is still a growth sector, right? Utilities, because we're going to be doing a lot of greening, because we're going to actually develop some strategies to do it locally, because we have an aging workforce.
There was a concern, obviously, by IBEW about ensuring that we don't contract it all out so that it becomes less than quality workforce.
Which is the huge issue about how do you get to renewables? Do you buy it off the grid or do you build it yourself? And I think that's going to maybe play out on the March ballot. There'll be actually a solar initiative that might be on the March ballot about that. But it's a fascinating internal conversation to the city.
Fascinating for a policy, Wong.
Yeah, and also, for a person over at DWP or for somebody looking for, what's going to happen to their job.
Utilities is a growth industry.
Clearly a growth industry. Right? And then at this point, we still believe hospitality.
You mentioned logistics.
Logistics is a growth industry. We hope now there's obviously.
Logistics, for those who don't know, is goods movement, moving products from the port to wherever it needs to go. And there's a need. We need some infrastructural pieces. That's the whole Alameda corridor thinking. Right. But once we develop those, that would be a very quickly expanding industry.
Yeah.
And you can't send it someplace else.
And you can't
Now,
say,
let me ask you,
we're
with
bringing it,
regard-
we're
with
replacing
regard to
manufacturing with logistics.
I know that you're probably keeping your eye on this notion that because of the high cost of gas, manufacturing actually becomes cheaper in the United States than in China.
Yeah.
Because it costs more to ship the goods than to build it here. But it takes time to gear up the manufacturing, and if the profitability catches up to the cost of gas, it will go back to China.
Yeah.
So tell me what your thoughts. I know you've probably seen this and explored
Well,
it.
I think in general, we lost manufacturing in large measure. We still have lots of manufacturing. We still have the larger garment manufacturing, part in we probably have about 60,000 jobs in garment here still in Los Angeles. But to the extent that we can internalize all these externalities, as they say, what the industry in China does is they say, okay, we don't care about the environment necessarily, right? Mm-hmm. And so here we actually have to pay for environmental cleanup and the remediation and and it makes goods more expensive. Same thing with wages, right? So to the extent that as we figure out the logistics chain, we can take advantage to make sure that logistics benefits Los Angeles.
So one of the notions of logistics is anticipating, for example, where manufacturing might move to.
I think that right now there's still movement out of the country, right? And it's primarily because of the ability of capital to externalize costs on local host countries and the workers there.
And NAFTA had nothing to do with that.
And so to the extent that we can try to internalize some of the costs in the logistics chain, I think that also sort of drives industry back into this country.
I think it's good to know that that the mayor's office is not just looking at jobs.
Yeah.
I've worked with several mayors, and I can tell you that they all three of the previous mayors, including Mayor Bradley, who was LA's greatest mayor, used to talk about jobs, but didn't talk about quality jobs as much. But you obviously are focused on quality jobs.
So our goal as a city, this is embraced by the full city workforce strategy, is to move 100,000 Los Angeles area residents into living wage jobs by June 30th, 2010, and this is how we're going to do it.
Okay.
Sector training, building systems, leveraging all hiring and contracting, moving young people into jobs, working with labor to transition non-living wage jobs into living wage jobs, right? And job creation related to the long-term permanent jobs under community benefits agreements with living wage requirements at our, at the places where we're actually doing new development.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And we would actually like your specific input. I'm not sure my interns know this. Larry Frank used to be the director at the Labor Center. He used to be Kent Wong. So he's an
Actually, I worked for Kent.
He
I was the
worked for
staff
Kent.
director and research director, but Kent hired me, so I want to
sorry.
correct that.
Okay.
He'll kill me.
But
Yeah.
he sort of has academic
Yeah.
focus on this stuff as well. So we would like your review of the document and help to literally help us write the document and
Love to. And also
make it
just
something that is more
everybody's
substantive.
invited to come on Thursday to the press room. We're actually showing a film on 6 young people who have gotten jobs in construction. So it relates to what Kevin, Madeline, and Veronica were speaking to. And we'd love to have you come and view this film. It's a great film that tracks 3 African Americans, 3
Very
Latinos into jobs in construction from a gang or prison background. It's an amazing piece of work.
Great.
So,
I'd be very
it's in here as
interested
well.
myself. Thank you very much. Raul and Norbe,
Yes. Hi, thank you for inviting us.
thank you for being here.
I'm the director of the Institute of Popular Education, Southern California. We also been working with day laborers since 1992, and IDEPSCA operates 6 day labor centers right now. And With me is Ms. Diaz, who is a member of the cooperative. In the back of the room, there's other members that I would like to acknowledge, Olivia and Reina, who have been with us for a long time trying to make our business grow. A little bit of background, then I'll pass it on to Mrs. Diaz so she can tell you a little bit about the company that we developed, the cooperative. IDEPSCA basically is a nonprofit organization, and that we realized that as we opened the labor centers, we left a huge segment out of the informal economy, which is the women, domestic workers. So as we opened up the centers, we invited women to come in and join in seeking employment. And as we worked the logistics and worked the organizing efforts, the women felt that they were separate from the men, and because the men were more competitive and more aggressive, and but we began dialoguing with them about violence, what constitutes violence, and for many years they addressed violence not only at home, most of them were single moms, but also violence in our communities. And there was always the need to talk about economic development, but we didn't know what it was at that time back in 1996. And as we evolved, we began without having any experience at all, but with the great courage and also great need, we started flyering the neighborhoods that we provided domestic labor. And little by little, calls started coming in, and women began to clean homes without any training. And as we evolved, we learned that we needed to develop some kind of a business. And by 2003, we learned about cooperatives. And at that time, there were about 10 women and about 6, 7 men who started learning from what is a cooperative. We began about values. We talked about sharing. We talked about decision-making process and about creating a business plan. In 2004, we invited a person from Oakland, an organization called Wages, that has done this kind of work. And she really pushed us and gave us the incentives to look beyond cooperative, but what kind of a cooperative in domestic work. So we learn about eco-friendly products, and we learn about health, and we learned that the products that commercial products use are detrimental to the workers' health, to the owners, the clients, and also to the environment. So our thinking began in saying, let's create a niche so that this company that is called now Magic Cleaners can really help the environment, help the clients, and help our health. And with the help of some foundations, we developed a business plan. And now there are the women are making living wages, and they are creating the company. Now they have a van. They pay their own bills, the telephone, and cellulars and computers and ink and their own products.
How many women are we talking about?
We began with 10 women, and now there's only 4 women participating in the cooperative. And now they have about approximately $10,000 in the bank to in case of emergencies. Mm-hmm. But specifically for Magic Cleaners, the cooperative, I'm going to pass it down to Mrs. Diaz so she can tell her story.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Estela.
You want me to translate?
Please.
Yes. Good afternoon, my name is Estela.
Yo soy parte de la cooperativa.
I'm part of the cooperative.
Me siento orgullosa de estar ahí porque he contribuido un poquito a la economía de este país.
I feel very proud of being part of the cooperative because we feel we have contributed a little bit to this economy.
No he sido una carga para él.
I haven't been a nuisance to this country.
Nosotros tratamos en la cooperativa de ir creciendo para poder dar más empleo.
We try to begin a growth so we can create jobs.
a más mujeres que nos quieran ayudar en la limpieza ecológica de casas.
To women specifically who want to use their ecological work,
Dándoles un salario digno,
providing them with dignified wages,
porque muchas de las compañeras que no están dentro de la cooperativa reciben el salario mínimo.
because many women who are not inside the cooperative do not receive the minimum wage.
Estando en la cooperativa hay un cambio de que tenemos un respaldo.
Inside the company, we have a background.
Y los clientes nos ven como una compañía formal,
The client sees us as a formal company
porque muchas compañeras que trabajan por su cuenta reciben abusos,
because many independent women workers are abused.
muchas veces no les pagan,
Many times they don't get paid.
las hacen trabajar más de 10 horas.
They work more than 10 hours.
Y estando en la cooperativa nos han respetado nuestros horarios y
En el-
nuestros salarios dignos.
And as part of the cooperative, they have respected our hours and our dignified salaries.
Y una de nuestras metas como miembros de la cooperativa
One of the goals for the cooperative
es formar más cooperativas de mujeres domésticas
is to replicate the cooperative for women
y transmitir lo que nosotros sabemos y nuestra experiencia para que haya más cooperativas de carpinteros,
and share what we have learned to other cooperatives such as carpentry
o de pintura,
or painters,
para que no haya tanto desempleo.
so we can decrease the unemployment.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Decrease the unemployment.
Decrease.
Well, thank you. Gracias por estar aquí. Yo sé que las mujeres mujeres inmigrantes son la mayoría de los negocios que están que son nuevos en la economía de nuestra sociedad en este estado. Por eso es necesario usar estos métodos como cooperativas. Este concepto es único, pero es diferente. Pero yo creo que hay un lugar en nuestra economía por desarrollamiento en esta área de cooperativas en nuestra comunidad. I believe this is a very special segment of our economy. The cooperatives are in many ways in an experimental phase of development, but this is actually an example of something that needs to be expounded on in our society to give opportunities to many. There are many thousands, tens of thousands of families that could be impacted if they understood how to form a business in a cooperative way. We know that, for example, the Korean community, they have a method of coming together to sort of put all their money in one pot and allow somebody to form a business, but everybody else benefits when they succeed, and everybody else shares in the benefits. But we think, I think that this needs to be explored further. The idea of cooperatives, essentially creating businesses that are owned by many people, and they're shared equally in terms of the benefits. So I congratulate you. It's scary to start a business, and I think you're to be commended. And the fact that there are four of you that are hanging on and doing the good work and are saving some money and preparing for the future is really a compliment to you. I think the government, to the extent that we have economic development dollars, to the extent that we have workforce development dollars, needs to invest in this effort. But we need to teach you more than just cleaning homes. We need to teach you about workers' comp and in the case of the environmental, the chemicals that have to be used in cleaning. that's part of that educational process. Every industry has particular things that need to be known. A ser dueño en nuestra sociedad es necesario saber muchas cosas, no más el servicio específico, pero la administración del negocio es muy difícil en nuestra sociedad donde tenemos muchas reglas en cada área. It's very difficult to start a business. It's not just about providing a specific service or skill. You got to learn about all the rules, and that's why we have a 90% failure for new businesses. They just don't. They know how to sew clothes, but they don't know how to do workers' comp. And why should they? But those are things that I'm sure you're learning.
Yes.
Están aprendiendo.
Can I just say something about the values? I think we have learned that we are a cooperative like a business, and we need to learn about competition. But inside the cooperative, we learn about sacrificing, because many of them are immigrants, and they have sacrificed by coming to this country because of displacement and poverty back home, but also the sacrifice of studying documents that we have provided, like workman's comp and business plan and all of the necessary documents that we need to know to learn about business so we can grow. So that's another sacrifice, and they leave their kids behind at home and their husbands so they can come and study with us about cooperatives. So I'm very glad that you invited us, because many of these women are hardly ever recognized by public officials.
What we would like to do is we're going to have different little stories that we tell in this document. It's not just going to be about statistics, but we'd like to feature ideas and successes, and so we would like to feature your organization and describe what is going on, so that we can enter into a discussion about how cooperatives might be what people need, and what governments certainly should help support, and some of the I'm thinking of the Valley Economic Development Center should be training groups like this, as opposed to just looking. This is non-traditional. It's very difficult, for example, to get a loan.
Yes.
We have 10 people signing the document.
Yes.
It's very difficult to get a loan, and so we need to create the mechanism to make it easier for them to do that. But anyway, I think it's a model that's worth exploring, and I greatly appreciate you being here. And buena suerte.
Okay,
Okay, thank you. And as I mentioned, I have family who began in the same path as you, working, cleaning other people's houses. In fact, I know of women who stay in the house that they are cleaning from Monday through Friday, and go home on the weekends, because they'll commute from East LA to Woodland Hills, and then they'll go back on Friday. So we need to educate people. If they're going to do that, they really should be compensated properly. And I don't think they are. For example, I don't think they're paid 24 hours a day. So. Anyway, thank you very much. Marvin Martinez, you're the final speaker.
Yes, yes.
But we left the most dynamic, talented speaker for the last.
Well, thank you so much, Councilmember Alarcon. You know, one of the advantages of going last is that I've had a chance to hear everybody, so I'm able to, I can be very precise as to what some of the specific issues that I think that are really pertinent to the report. So let me first expand on what Deputy Mayor Frank was talking about, in that by having this workforce collaborative group, we're able to identify specifically the training programs.
Before you go there, could you just explain just for a minute the role that the Community College District plays in the workforce development system of the state of California? Just spend a minute on that. I appreciate it.
Excellent question. Our role is specifically to train the workforce. It is one of our missions. It is, we are mandated by the state, obviously, in order to do that.
And the state sees you as the primary recipient of all workforce development funding.
Exactly. We're the primary recipient of state dollars and many of the federal dollars that also come to the state of California in order to prepare students for the workforce. Having said that, we are a district that we're the largest district in the country. We're made up of 9 colleges, enrollment of nearly 200,000 students. We're talking about credit and non-credit. Having said that, we want to make sure that as we are developing new programs for the workforce, we don't do them in isolation. So we work very closely with the city and other major workforce development agencies to, number one, identify those programs and develop the curriculum, work with industry to develop the curriculum, and to figure out how to offer them so that students can take them. So let me give an example of what that means. Most students today obviously can't be in classes for a year to 2 years. They are living in poverty. They want to come and take classes for a couple of months, and they want to be able to go out and work as quickly as they can. So many of the programs that we're beginning to develop are short-term courses. We are looking at some bilingual programs that we're putting together as we speak. We are expanding our non-credit area so that we can offer specific courses as we prepare students for the workforce. So these are programs that are targeting a lot of the youth in a lot of these communities. So let me talk also a couple of areas of how we're outreaching to the disadvantaged youth in order to bring them to the college. We're doing it in 2 ways, on campus and off campus. Off campus, we're developing several satellite campuses. We think that there's a need for us to develop campuses in underserved areas. Campuses that have a focus on job training, campuses that are working in collaboration with a council member in that area, with other city agencies, with LAPD, with other workforce agencies, in order to prepare students who live in that community for the workforce. So we have some satellite campuses now. With the new bond we're going to be running in the ballot in November. We're budgeting for some new ones. I'm sure you're aware of the Panorama City campus we're putting together. We're also putting a campus over at LAX. And this is a campus that will focus on hospitality and hotel management. Actually, it's property that we've owned for a long time. It's about 5 acres that we own by the LAX area. So we are working on this site in collaboration with the mayor's office, County Federation of Labor, LAWA, and the hotels in order to prepare students to enter the workforce and to prepare the incumbent workforce that's already there. So that's an example of one. We're also looking at a site over at the LA County medical area. We're going to build a health career academy. Again, the purpose of the career academy is to target disadvantaged youth, immigrant populations, so they can enter the health career. The health industry. And I'm not talking about just about nursing. There's other types of occupations, obviously, that exist. So we're working out there because we think we have to be out there.
Having mentioned nursing, the state is still providing, the federal government is providing about 30,000 visas for nurses to come into this country when we have numerous people who are interested in that career, and we're just not getting them talent. We're not getting them the training they need to.
Well, and then also, as colleges, we can't do it by ourselves. We have to work with others. We have to work.
You are the largest trainer of nurses in the.
We are. We're the largest, but we can be larger. And so that's really what we're trying to do. Is we have to take it to another gear, so to speak. So this will allow us to do that. Internally, what are we doing to attract these students, to attract the populations of all those students to the colleges? We're, again, collaborating with the City of LA. We're going to co-locate, for example, workforce centers on most of our campuses. That includes from Harbor College down by the Harbor area to Trade, East, Valley. What that will allow us to do is that it will allow for those population of students to come to the college and to be enrolled in college courses and to get them on a career path. So that's an example, one of the things that we're doing. Also, we just started this program with the city, another program where we're partnering with some community-based organizations to provide students with after-school employment. So what that means is that as we speak, they're coming to our summer session right now. At the end of the summer session, they will have an opportunity to become employed half-time as instructional assistants, making nearly $12 an hour for a full year. This is part of our new teacher career pathway program. And again, the purpose of it is we know that, when you tell a student that, by the way, it's going to take you 4 years in order to graduate, in order to become a teacher, you're not going to get many takers. However, if we're able to put together a program that also has a job along the way, a job that's related in that field, they will do that. So this year we just started the program in 7 of the 9 colleges. So we're talking about almost 500 students that we have enrolled. The Packard Foundation has met with us in order to upscale this program so we can offer it year-round. So hopefully we want to be able to get this going in January of 2009, where we will have almost 3,000 to 5,000 students enrolled in teacher career pathway programs, again attached to a job. So that's the key. You got to get them
Fair to
hooked.
say the whole orientation of the community college district has changed in the last several years.
It has to change.
Has to change.
It has to change.
Now,
yeah.
one of the dilemmas of the community college district over that same period of time, last 10, maybe even 15 years, is that much more of your students, many more of your students, are there to learn English. And that isn't a primary responsibility of the community college district. And in fact, many of these same students would be eligible for 4-year colleges, but are instead taking remedial work at your level.
Right.
I've always been an advocate for the universities, the 4-year colleges and universities, to do a lot more of that. They need to do more of the remedial training and keep those people on campus so that they don't close up opportunities at the community college district. But it's been a losing cry, and it's really depleting the sort of focus that you have on workforce development. I should remind folks that the community college district was created after World War II, specifically to create higher, or I should say upwardly mobile job opportunities for veterans, and create a new society that where working class people had access to college, but they also had a transition phase and they could go to a 4-year college after the 2 years, but they would be ready to go into the workforce if they didn't. And we're sort of being a graduated high school. Just in high school that's where you should learn English and math, your basic fundamental reading, writing, arithmetic. And more and more of our students are depleting the resources from the community college district instead of going to the adult schools. And it's driven all by funding formulas and all that, but the bottom line is that your focus should be on workforce development, and that's a statement that we need to make in this document, and we would appreciate your help in preparing that language.
No problem.
Unless I'm wrong.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. We're our goal over the next 5 years is to increase our enrollment from 200,000 to 225,000. How we're going to do that? We have to go out to them. We have to go out to the communities and establish those programs. We have to go out and develop those basic skills courses that are needed, those ESL courses that are needed, those bilingual vocab programs that are needed.
One thing about community college, when I was talking earlier about this whole notion of creating this formula for success about going to college, it's actually the community colleges can provide that level of success without committing to a 4-year experience. I'm having this ongoing battle with my staff about how long it's going to take me to get to my next appointment. But in any case, the community college is critical to the economic development of the city of Los Angeles, and so we will incorporate into the master plan, particularly in the education component, but also in the workforce development component, a discussion about the community college system and how they can contribute better. Also, the whole notion that before apprenticeship programs were directly incorporated into the industries, they didn't rely on the schools. The schools just taught reading, writing, arithmetic, and then they went and got trained in business. Somehow, somewhere along the line in society, everybody starts pointing the finger at public education. That was never. In fact, for the first 50 years of American society, we didn't have public schools. So it was the employer that took on the responsibility to educate in terms of specific skills. And somehow we've lost sight of that. I think the businesses, the employers, need to take more responsibility with regard to apprenticeship and education on the job.
I agree.
In any case, I know you know that whole notion well, but and I am very interested in having a brief comment about the satellites, because community colleges need to be about the community.
Right.
And if they're getting too far away from the community. Thomas Jefferson, I always use this quote, Thomas Jefferson used to say that nobody should go to school more than 5 miles from their home. I don't know that he was talking about universities, but I do believe he was talking about local schools, and particularly elementary and high schools. And I think those satellites will be very helpful to the community college district. Besides, in terms of traffic patterns and everything else, it's just a mess. And we don't want people speaking against the college. We want them speaking for the college.
Yeah, and just quickly in regards to transportation, we're starting a new program called iPass, where all students will be issued a bus pass, so they can take the bus in order to go to the college.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because you know,
for that?
we're paying for that out of the bond, out of the interest that was generated from the previous bonds.
Oh, interesting.
So that's how we're paying for that. And then other colleges, several colleges, are developing their own customized shuttle service in order to. Anyway, this will be free transportation.
Those kinds of things, those are the kinds of things we need to talk about.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll be an anecdotal story, but how just paying for the bus pass has, increased the people who actually attend school. Those are very good notions. I do have to get to my next appointment, but more importantly, we've finished. So I want to thank you. Do we have any public comment cards?
Sir.
No, we don't. But thank you all. I do appreciate you being here to testify. And it's just not about one day. We're hopeful that you will look at the documents as we develop them, the drafts, and we do want your comments, positive, critical comment about the document, what areas we're missing, what opportunities we're missing. Anecdotal stories. We'd love to hear about the women who put together Magic Cleaners, and have a little featured story in the document. But if you know of others that we should incorporate to give us a glimpse of society, of poverty in Los Angeles, and what some of the solutions are to poverty, that would be very helpful as well. So don't be surprised if you get more phone calls from us, because we absolutely need your help to finish this project. And sir, let me tell you that is the most well-behaved baby in the entire city of Los Angeles. And
spoken from under death.
And look at her. Oh my gosh, she's beautiful. Look at that smile. But congratulations. She's the most well-behaved
Her name is
child.
Marta.
Marta, gracias por estar aquí. Thank you for being so good.
Thank you.
Anyway, take
Thank
care.
you. Thank you.
Lectures, so that it was part of the